Right. Hello, George.
How you doing? Nice to see you.
Doing well.
You good?
Doing well. I'm very good. You are calling us from your brand new office where everything works smoothly and perfectly.
That's us. Yeah. Yeah, we're based, or kind of HQ is in Fitzrovia, like in the middle of town, and then obviously like home farm is probably not a million miles from you. I'm imagining we're about 20 minutes either way from either Swindon or Oxford, whichever direction you're coming from.
Yeah. So for the purpose of our millions of subscribers and people who are going to be watching this video, I should probably just say hello, George Lamb. You are one of the co-founders of Wildfarmed. You're a absolutely rock and roll brand coming out of the UK that's really promoting regenerative farming. And we would love to hear what you think it is you do and why people who are interested in biodiversity monitoring management should get to know you.
Great. Good. I'm ready. I'm here for it.
So tell us about regenerative farming. What is it from the wild farm perspective?
I mean, it's this is something we've been trying to figure out for a very long time, but you know, something along the lines of really good quality food grown in nature-rich landscapes. That's what regen is to us, you know. And then depending on how much you want to expand that, you know, regeneration is about renewing and regrowing and restoring and bringing back to life. And so our whole kind of ethos as a brand is about being full of life. So when Wild Farms show up, you know, you just alluded to us feeling kind of rock and roll. We show up with energy and vitality, and you know, trying to emulate effectively what we're doing in the fields, which is trying to take, you know, unfortunately, as I'm sure a lot of the viewers or listeners will know, over the course of the last 100 years, you know, we've had a big focus as humans on feeding ourselves. We've done a great job at that, but unfortunately, it's been at the expense of the natural world. We feel we've reached kind of breaking point, and so what can we do as a society to try and figure that out? Ultimately, you know, like you know, one should know that you know, like the polar bears dying in the ice caps and the ice caps melting is a bad thing, but it feels quite abstract. Similarly, you know, the Amazon burning, like we know that's the planet's lungs, but again, it's quite a long way to the Amazon. It feels a bit abstract and far away, you know. However, most people are lucky enough to be eating a couple of times a day, and so our whole, you know, kind of mission is how can we get a better food system? Food systems responsible for about a third of the environmental damage that's going on at the moment. How can we get a better food system? How can we give people agency in this great big problem?
Got it. So that's quite interesting segue from regenerative agriculture. So our encounter with regen has always been focused on farms, and Chirrup is a B2B, you know, or a B2F proposition. We provide our services to farms where they are trying to make that regenerative transition. But you're a B2C brand. You're working with farmers, you know, very closely, but at the same time you are appealing to the consumer. What gave you the confidence to take this sort of slightly abstract technical idea and turn it into a consumer brand?
I suppose, you know, like Andy had been, so my business partner is a guy called Andy Cato. He was in a band called Groove Armada about 17 years ago. He was coming home from a gig, picked up an article. There was a piece on the unforeseen consequences of the industrial food system. You know, broadly speaking, it's the number one cause for deforestation, soil degradation, and biodiversity collapse. You know, ended with a line: if you don't like the system, don't depend on it. He had a go at self-sufficiency for a few years, got a vegetable patch became a polytunnel became a stall, and before long he decided to take the wildly naive decision to sell his publishing rights and buy a farm down in Gascony. He didn't know, because he was a novice farmer, he didn't know what he was looking for. He didn't know that when you buy a farm you should check the soil organic matter. His farm, retrospectively, he found out had 0.5% organic matter, so effectively the land was kind of infertile. He was in a war of attrition for a couple of years. He was hell bent on doing things organically, and so he was in a war of attrition with docks and thistles and all the rest of it, and all these other plants that we call weeds that are actually just giving us information, but we're fighting them rather than understanding what they're telling us. And he, whilst his band Groove Armada had been successful, they certainly weren't Oasis. So there was a kind of cap on how long this regenerative experiment could go on for. And after a couple of years, it was looking like he was going to go bankrupt and he was going to jack the whole thing in. And then he was back in the UK, picked up a book. He was in a secondhand bookstore, mislabeled in the kids section that he was looking for a book for his daughter. Was a book called An Agricultural Testament by a guy called Sir Albert Howard. He's been dead 100 years. He was one of the founding fathers of the organic movement. Basic thesis of the book is that plants and animals have developed over millennia in perfect symbiosis, and if you separate them, you take a perfect solution and you create all sorts of problems. He decided he was going to have one last roll at the dice. That looked like 40 red Sussex cattle coming onto the fields. They're nature's composting machine. They ate, they poop, they trample, they eat, they poop, they trample. All of a sudden, the birds, the bugs, the bees, everything came back in, and the balance and the equilibrium and the life and the vibrancy and all the stuff we were just talking about a second ago. And he realized, doing it regeneratively is the way to bring this kind of, sterile, infertile land back to life. And so began this very long kind of deep dive, which myself and the rest of the Wild Farm gang have joined him on. And so, yeah, how do we really change what's going on in the world? As I'm sure lots of people listening would have felt, like I felt so frustrated opening newspapers or turning on the news or listening to the radio, being told just endless kind of doom and gloom. And it's like, right, how can we actually do something about this? And so to me, the big problem with, regeneration, sustainability, ESG, all of these things, they're not very sexy and they're not very playful and they're not very fun. And so, like sustainability, not that we're doing the one on from sustainability, but like it shouldn't and can't be a drag, and we've got to try and make this thing feel vibrant and current, and we've got to put it in the zeitgeist. And so we'd all worked in, or certainly myself and Andy had worked in realms where we were kind of putting stuff out to the world and getting a reaction from consumers. And so I don't know, it doesn't feel alien to me to I saw this brilliant idea. I saw the wonderful work that he was doing, and I was just like, how do we scale this? How do we bring this to the people? We were working. Andy was down in France for a long time, doing this thing in his local area, and really getting traction, and all the local schools were getting bread delivered. They're the first bread queues in the little French village since 1945. There was 6 local families earning a living from the farm. They had, they had a kind of teaching facility there, so people coming from all over the place. And then one night we were sitting and looking out at the adjacent field, and it's a lot of maize down there. The guy had just harvested, and we were looking out, and I said to Andy, "What's the deal with the big white strips that you could see in the field?" And he was like, "That's bedrock." And I was like, "What do you mean bedrock?" And he's like, "That's rock where there should be soil, but because of the way they're farming, all the soil's eroding." And I was like, "Wow, that's mad. So what happens next?" He's like, "This is how deserts happen." And I was like, "But we're only 2 hours south of London." He was like, "I know, mate. That's what I've been trying to tell you." So that was the bit where we realized kind of, I suppose, yeah, like we realized we had to bring it to consumers. And so when you feel a necessity to do something, there wasn't really a question of like, can we do it? It was, we have to do it. And so we'll figure a way out, I suppose, is the very long-winded answer to your question.
We're going to think of a way to summarize that for the comms. But are you in the process of growing from a small business where I guess you're doing those sort of face-to-face, know your consumer directly relationships? You've moved up into the realm of, M&S in 2022, taking you on, and more recently Tesco this year in 2025.
Yeah.
How has that changed? What has differed in those staging points from early days to first retailer to really, really big global scale retailer?
I mean, our first ever website that we had, the homepage said we're on the long road to Greggs, and that's been our mission from the outset. If we didn't believe that this can be scaled and needs to be scaled. We could have just stayed happily in Andy's farm in France and set up a kind of centre of excellence and had people come to us. But unfortunately, our feeling between us was that we were running out of ecological road, and so we needed to move quickly. And so when we came here, we were very, we were adamant that we were going to scale it. We also came to the UK specifically to scale it because neither Ed nor I speak English. Sorry, we don't speak English. We don't speak French, and so we couldn't help Andy in France really, or there was a limit on how much we could help him. So we came back to the UK and we set, as I say, this very clear kind of mission. We're on the long road to Greggs. I want to try and democratize real food, and so that's our mission. How do we get this into the hands and mouths of as many households as we can in the country and beyond? And the way you start. Number one, I think you have to set the vision. Number two, you have to go out and find some brave people who are kind of early adopters who are interested in the stuff that you're interested in and try and sell them the idea, and that's what we did. We went out and we talked to a bunch of farmers. We went and talked to people who are already doing really amazing stuff in the regen scene and just said, look, we've got this idea. We were over there. We didn't, we felt we were making an impact, but it was limited. We've decided to come back here. We want to see if we can blow this up so we can really change stuff. We can really change the agricultural landscape. Do you want to come and work with us? And everybody was like, yeah, I would love to be part of something. Because when you're a kind of frontiers person, or you're doing things that are out of the norm, it takes a lot of bravery and actually having a team and having some support and feeling part of a community. Incredibly isolated job farming. Like 100 years ago, most farms would have 20, 30 people working on them. Now they might have 2 or 3, And so you're making, you're in isolation, you're making massive decisions about your family's livelihoods in increasingly erratic weather conditions, in short windows. It's a lot of pressure, and as I'm sure or your listeners might know, that the risk burden in the food system, a totally disproportionate amount of it sits on the farmer. So asking them to do things differently is a real, it's not just a kind of like a quick conversation. It's a massive jump. And so if you can put a framework and a support team and an infrastructure around them and help them, make it possible, then you've got a chance of making it happen. And so that was the first cohort of people that we went and spoke to. And then the next group of people we went and talked to were the artisan baking community. A bunch of people who work really, really hard, who care deeply about the provenance of their food, care deeply about what their customers are eating, and went to them and spoke to them and said, listen, we've got this idea. We don't want regen to be a niche. We don't want it to get co-opted. We feel like we can do this thing at scale, but we're going to need your support. And a load of really brave bakers came forward. And at the beginning, we were like milling it ourselves, so it was a bit erratic. We didn't have any of the levels of sophistication in our infrastructure that we have today. And so, just like they were taking a gamble on us. It was also way more expensive than it is now, and so asking people to kind of go the extra mile, work with this new product. I don't know if you're familiar, but baking and cooking, very, very different things. Baking is literally a science. If you even within, if we went to a baker and said, what brand are you using, and they say we're using brand A flour, even within brand A, if you swap from flour 1 to flour 6, all your timings are going to be out basically, and your measurements are going to be out, and so your end product. So asking bakers to change anything and asking them to jump over to an entirely new product that they have no idea, it's a big ask. Anyway, Fortunately, they did it. So they were able to support and kind of match the ambition of this brilliant cohort of farmers, and then gradually you start to get you start to create a buzz, in kind of the same way as you do in the music industry. That's, so you're doing a kind of cottage industry thing. You start to create a groundswell, you start to create a buzz. And then the next concentric circle of the bigger kind of, high street brands or national brands, they're looking around at like what's going on, what's interesting. We're hearing rumbles over here. Okay, this sounds exciting. Fortunately, a few of those guys were brave enough to come on board. And then last year, we had an opportunity to go in to start working with Jeremy Clarkson on Clarkson's farm on season 3 of that. And so we coincided the launch of that program with our own grocery line. So you can go in now and buy a whole Wildfarm range in your local supermarket. And so that's been the kind of progression, which is ongoing.
And is there a different dynamic now to the way it was 3 years ago? Because, as I say, as far as we can tell, you were with M&S in 2022, and it's taken a further 3 years for the big beast of Tesco to come around to the Wildfarmed view.
So what's the question? Is there a different dynamic in
what respect? in the sense that I mean, in this regen world, in the world of food production, Waitrose and M&S might be early adopters of value-added foodstuffs that have got a non-commodity appeal. And Tesco might come later. Is that how you found it? And are there things that you needed to do differently to get?
I mean,
into
Tesco's. Tesco's will tell you that they've got more. They've got more ABC1 shoppers than most supermarkets have shoppers. They've got a huge control of the market. They're over a third of all of the groceries bought in the UK. And of course, I'd be lying if, as I say, we set that ambition. So we've got to be working with the likes of Tesco's and all the biggest food businesses in the country if we're really going to have impact. And I mean, is it different? I don't know. It doesn't feel that different. Like we're like any business. We're 5 years in now. The team's building steadily every year. The processes and the protocols and the organisation, the structure, and full disclosure, I was still cleaning the windows today. So like some days you don't feel like you've moved on at all or whatever. But but then some days some days you do. Some days it feels like a totally different business. But like it's I don't know. Yeah, we've got to get farmers to grow the stuff in the right way. We got to get it in and get it sorted and get it out, and then we got to get people to buy it and promote it and then get the money in and start the whole process again. Basically, that's the thing. And so we're certainly a more sophisticated business than we were. But like I don't know that it doesn't feel infinitely different. Things take a bit longer, which is not great for someone who's impatient like me. But then equally, like there's something magical about like my cousins and my nan and whoever being able to go into Tesco's near them and go and grab a loaf of bread,
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's an interesting question, really, for us. In thinking about this sort of direct to consumer proposition, some people like the sense of the rock and roll, the challenge. Some people like the consistency and the availability. And then there's these sort of components of the brand that appeal differently to different people. And obviously the one that we're interested in, and we have some of the farms that are taking Chirrup products are interested in, is this biodiversity component of the brand that appeals differently to different people. How do you see biodiversity playing out amongst consumers? What role does it represent in the Wildfarmed proposition?
I mean, we had a kind of like funny. I don't know if we made it up or we nicked it off someone else or whatever. But we had this whole bit for a while, and it reads across the biodiversity as well. But someone was saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question, but I'm pretty sure the answer is diversity." And so that reads across. At its core, I think people can understand biodiversity. I think they understand diversity. I think that it's. I think people getting like big feelings for like carbon's probably unlikely. But birds and bees and butterflies and insects and different plants and all the rest, I think people can wrap their head around that pretty easily. I think most kids get it in a kind of innate way.
And you've got a more of traction in that area than pretty much any other brand I can think of. How do you personally see it? Is biodiversity an input or is it a brand value? If you had to choose one being the more important.
so what would an input be versus because like inputs to me, in kind of farming terms, that's like stuff you put on your fields.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you mean it in that? Do you mean it in that
Yeah.
terminology?
Does it feel to you? Yeah. Does it feel to
Well, I
you
mean,
like
look,
a component of the farm operation?
I think it's central to what we do. It's like, it's right in the middle. I'm literally, like, I don't know if you can see. Can you see that?
And now, yeah, beautiful.
So like everything behind me, like maybe we'll send you a picture of this. You can put it up on the screen. But we've got a whole scene here talking about what we do on field, and there's frogs and cows and rabbits and flowers and insects and birds and bees and all the rest of it. Like the whole thing's there.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'll send you a picture. So and that's really, like that for us just shows you like what we are as an organization. That's what a wild farm is to us. So it couldn't be more central, really. It's not a kind of, I don't know how you do regenerative without having an increase in biodiversity being a kind of central theme to what you're doing. In fact, I'd argue you can't do it.
Okay, good. So I mean, we've been helping you a little bit this year with doing some monitoring, and I'm hoping that out of that we will see some clear signals of the sorts of species that a wild farmed approach will encourage. And I don't know if you've got them already on the board behind you, but if not, we'll send you a picture of whatever it might be, a skylark or whatever's.
Great. We'll get them on there.
So you're a communicator. Andy's former musician and currently farmer. Ed's, as I understand it, the business guy, finance guy. Sounds like you covered a lot of the bases really for a business that's growing like yours is. Do you think you could have achieved what you've done without those skills? And the reason I asked the question, a lot of the folks that are listening into this, whether they be farmers or folks building businesses in the nature tech space or the agri-tech space, they may not start with those advantages.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I'm a big believer. I don't believe there's any like, what's the right word? How's the right way to put it? Like, I don't. I believe anything's possible, basically. So there's no objective reality. There's no one way of like how it is. Like you can do whatever. If you really put your mind to something, I believe you can pull it off. But what I'm learning as I get older is like the genius is in the doing, not actually in the idea. And of course, everything, the genesis point of all of it needs to be a really great idea, but that's almost kind of got to be a given, really, because if you're not starting with something brilliant and you're not going to execute it well, like you don't stand a chance, because there's lots of brilliant ideas that are well formed that are put out into the world that don't make it. And so what I can tell you is this is the first time I've ever been in a business. I've had many businesses previously, or many like projects, businesses, whatever, that I've done. The first time I've ever had a business partner who's a business person, and that makes a massive difference. I can't tell you, like a lot of people, I'm kind of the one. Well, Andy and I are more in the kind of front line. But if Ed went under a bus, this place would be, we'd be shut in a couple of months, basically, So
Okay.
it's a, running a business is no mean feat, and so you for sure you've got to have a really good idea, and for sure you've got to have loads of passion. But actually, I've had all the things I've done in my life, we've had kind of like at the very least critical success. But like you can't buy your dinner with critical success. So you need money, and you need to make it needs to stack up, and like as much as it pains me when I'm not allowed the budget I want to make the film or tell the story or do the thing or whatever, like I also understand why we're doing it, and why the company's in a good position, and we're going to be around for a long time. So
It's music to the ears. On that subject, then, and I don't know if we've gone over our time, but call if that's the case. But
no,
where do you see the expansion happening? I mean, if you're going to be here for a long time, that gives you some roads to make up? Is it international expansion? Is it product range expansion? Are there particular areas of growth?
Yeah, I mean, none of us are in a huge rush to go off and do it in different countries. We'd love to find some different partners over, around the world, maybe to go and do it. It's not to say that it won't happen, but it's not our kind of, I feel like all of us feel like we've really got to nail it here first, and then when you've really nailed something, and then it makes it much easier to go and transfer it elsewhere. For us, really, it's about how can we be doing more land? How can we be having more impact? How can ultimately, certainly it's not kind of sexy, but the kind of like audience penetration or whatever it is, like how many households know who we are and what we do and why we're doing it. And at the moment, like whilst we're doing very well in this space, it's, kind of inconsequential numbers that we'd be doing on a kind of national level. And so how do we become a household name, and with that, if we can become a household name, then all the stuff that, everything that comes with that will follow.
Right. And so is that necessarily suggesting a sort of mass market approach?
I mean, we sell in Tesco's, and we work with most of the biggest food companies in the world. So we absolutely want to be mass market. Like we're a scale business. That's what we're doing.
And does that involve trade-offs from the stuff that you did in the early days? Are the things that you can't do in a sort of more personalised way when you're dealing with mass market?
I mean, listen, I think like everything in life, if you're talking to if you're talking to people en masse, then for sure it's going to be a slightly different kind of exchange, the kind of one-to-one exchange. But we all made a decision that actually, if you want to change stuff, and again, I don't know that I'm right, I'm just telling you what we decided. Like if you really want to change stuff as we do, then you have to be working at a large scale. Like otherwise it's just not gonna, like who else is going to do this, basically? And so we decided that that's what we want to do. And for sure there'll be trade-offs, and for sure maybe you don't get to have that one-to-one interaction or whatever. But similarly, I was at a wedding of a friend at the weekend, and somebody was asking about what we did, and I was chatting away, and then someone else was like, "Is that the bright green one with the worm on it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "My kids love that one." And I was like, "Great, man! Like it's coming." You know what I mean? Like we're still a way off, but it's coming. And
you're on your way.
And so if we carry on how we're going, then I'm very confident that we're going to be in a good shape, and we might actually be able to change stuff. And like there needs to be another 1,000 wild farms, coming down the track as well. Like if we can give, like I really believe that like the kind of best thing you can do in life is kind of role modeling, basically. So if you can show people like, hey, like we've been able to create a business, it does lots of good. Everybody in the supply chain is paid equitably, and we make money. Like what a brilliant vision that is. And so unfortunately at the moment we've been shown this kind of winner takes all, and most of the people in the value chain don't get looked after properly. The planet's getting absolutely rinsed, and there's a small group of shareholders taking all the money, and like that just doesn't make any sense.
So I guess a big part of your value proposition is also this relationship with the farms. Is there a message that you're giving out right now to farms who become the next? I mean, you said next 1,000 wild farms. I guess that means brands, but at the same time, you probably need more farms in order to reach your potential. So what would you say to those farms?
Same thing we've always said, like like if you're very happy doing what you're doing and you think it's going well and everything's golden, like keep doing what you're doing, man. But like if you feel, as a lot of farmers do, that something's not quite, something's rotten in Denmark, basically, which is how a lot of people feel. You know, if you're putting more and more chemicals on your fields and getting less and less yields, and those input prices are going up, and so you're making less money, and you know you can't hear any of the curlews or the skylarks or the whatever, and you know there's nothing going on your windscreen, and you're like, this doesn't feel quite right, you know, and a disproportionate number of your colleagues have been getting sick with, you know, weird diseases and stuff. Like there's other ways of doing things, you know, and it's difficult because we're, you know, like humans aren't wild about change, but there's a network of really interesting people, and like I think, you know, one of the great things about one of the tricky things about working with a small insular community is like trying to break into it. Once you've broken into a small insular community, which farming is, like getting you know, so long if you build a good reputation within that, getting traction within that industry is not so difficult, because every farmer we deal with is good pals with and/or family with at least another 5 or 10 farmers. You know?
Got it. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but of course, the first bit, the penetration bit, that's difficult. Getting in's difficult, because you know you're some new person coming around, you know, another snake oil salesman coming to tell them you know, we've got all the answers, and you know, and they're like, oh yeah, right, I've seen you before, mate. You know, so, so yeah, we just got to keep doing a good job, keep doing what we say we're going to do, make sure everybody gets paid properly, and they'll encourage other people in, because unfortunately for a long time the farmers haven't been incentivized to farm in a way that's better for the planet and better for humans. So so long as we can keep doing that.
And as far as you're focused, you know, in your strategy, this is going to be arable farming for grain, for baked products.
I mean, anything you can put, anything. I mean, we already work with a lot of brewers, and so you know we've got barley going into that.
Right.
We've got our oats going into, you know, to I want to call them like tracker bars or whatever, but that's actually a brand, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, you know, kind of oaty
cereal
bars on the run, cereal bars. That's the guy. And then of course, all our wheat's going into baked goods. So, but yeah, I mean, we're certainly not in a hurry to like move into the cauliflower game or whatever, you know, if that's what you were asking.
I know some cauliflower farmers that will be very disappointed by that. But, different model. So, and I suppose final question in a way is coming back to what looks like your mission, which is landscape focused and bringing landscapes back to life. Do you see that as a strategic focus where you take contiguous farms that are all within the same landscape and, you know, adjacent, and have sort of common natural assets, and get them to manage, you know, as a group within a landscape?
I mean, we certainly when we started, we were really trying to build cohorts, you know, as much as anything, as a kind of support network.
Yeah.
I know from you know, we've been doing a dance with the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and talking about how we could create these kind of like nature corridors across the country and all that kind of stuff, and like for sure it'd be great to get, you know, land that all butts up to one another, but that can't be our principal focus. Our principal focus is bringing more skilled farmers into our cohort, and trying to just move the needle a bit, you know, because it's by doing that we'll actually be able to change stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, George. Really appreciate your time.
Nice one, Conrad. Nice talking to you, mate.
And we will be in touch soon.